In a potentially game-changing development, the United States has decided to provide Ukraine with real-time intelligence enabling long-range strikes on Russian energy infrastructure. This marks the first officially acknowledged instance of Washington directly supporting Ukrainian attacks deep inside Russian territory, dramatically expanding the scope of US involvement in the conflict. Moscow immediately reacted, warning of a new escalation, while analysts note that this move effectively redraws the strategic map of the war and possibly the global balance of deterrence. This report breaks down what has changed in US policy, the nature of recent Ukrainian deep strike operations, the Kremlin's reaction and likely countermoves, the geopolitical consequences and scenarios ahead. According to multiple sources, the United States has begun sharing target-specific intelligence with Kiev for attacks on refineries, power plants, and fuel depots across Russia. This assistance no longer stops at Ukraine's borders. It now includes deep strike data reaching far into Russian territory. At the same time, Washington is reportedly considering supplying Tomahawk cruise missiles, capable of hitting targets more than 1,000 kilometers away, a huge leap from the current ATACMS and Storm Shadow systems. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov admitted that the US already provides intelligence on a regular basis, but described this latest move as a dangerous escalation. The decision marks a major departure from Washington's cautious approach during the first 2 years of war, when it avoided any appearance of direct involvement in operations beyond Ukraine's borders. Why now? Strategically, the goal is to undermine Russia's war economy by targeting its most profitable assets, oil and energy exports. These account for roughly 40% of the Kremlin's annual budget. Ukraine has long requested expanded strike capabilities, after the limited authorization to use mid-range ATACMS inside Russian staging areas. This broader intelligence support signals that Washington is ready to raise the stakes. It also reflects growing frustration among European allies who argue that Western aid must inflict tangible costs on Russia's ability to finance its invasion. Perhaps the clearest demonstration of Kiev's evolving tactics came on June 1, 2025, when Ukraine launched Operation Spiderweb, a coordinated drone assault on multiple Russian airbases across 5 regions. According to intelligence assessments, about 20 Russian aircraft were damaged and at least 10 destroyed. Other estimates suggest as many as 40 aircraft hit, making it one of the most sophisticated cross-border operations to date. The strike spanned 5 time zones and showcased Ukraine's growing capability to coordinate simultaneous long-range drone attacks and electronic warfare far beyond its front lines. Another milestone was the Kursk offensive launched on August 6, 2024, when Ukrainian mechanized units crossed the border into Russia's Kursk Oblast. Ukrainian forces captured several settlements, advancing up to 35 kilometers inside Russia and temporarily controlling an estimated 430 square kilometers of territory. It was the largest ground incursion into Russia since 2022, combining infantry, artillery, drone swarms, and armored vehicles in a synchronized assault. Although Russian counterattacks eventually retook parts of the area, the message was unmistakable. Ukraine can now operate inside Russia both from the air and on the ground. Official warnings. Moscow's response was swift. The Kremlin accused Washington of fueling the conflict and warned of unpredictable consequences if US-supplied intelligence continues to enable attacks on Russian soil. President Putin personally warned that such actions would open a new level of escalation. Despite the strong rhetoric, Russian officials also attempted to downplay the shift, portraying it as an extension of existing intelligence cooperation rather than an entirely new phase. Analysts outlined several possible Russian responses. Expanded missile attacks on Ukraine, targeting power grids and logistics hubs to retaliate symmetrically. Asymmetric warfare, cyber attacks, sabotage operations, or proxy actions against Western infrastructure. Diplomatic and military pressure, increased mobilization, nuclear posturing, and propaganda campaigns framing the US as a direct combatant. Each carries the same risk: loss of escalation control. A single miscalculation could transform a proxy war into a direct U.S. Russia confrontation, an outcome neither side officially desires. By enabling Ukrainian attacks inside Russia, Washington has blurred the line between defensive assistance and offensive intervention. Legally, the move will trigger intense debate. Moscow argues that US involvement makes every such strike a joint act of aggression. Washington, however, frames it as legitimate collective self-defense, since Russian attacks originate from those same facilities. The shift raises a key question. Where does deterrence end and participation begin? Europe now faces its own test. Nations like Poland and the Baltic states support a harder line, while Germany and France urge caution to avoid drawing NATO into direct confrontation. If more European governments follow the US lead in providing intelligence or logistics, the alliance could face internal friction between hawks and pragmatists. Yet, after months of stalemate on the battlefield, momentum clearly favors those arguing that Russia must feel the pain inside its borders to be forced toward negotiations. Since 2022, the United States has provided roughly $66.9 billion in military assistance to Ukraine. This includes air defense systems, artillery, armored vehicles, and now, advanced targeting intelligence. However, US domestic politics have occasionally disrupted that flow, as seen during the 2024-25 standoff between former President Trump and President Zelensky. The new policy of offensive support raises the stakes for Washington's credibility. Any hesitation or rollback could weaken Allied trust and embolden Moscow. What happens next? 1. Controlled escalation. The most probable scenario: a calibrated escalation. The US continues sharing intelligence and perhaps delivers long-range weapons but imposes restrictions on their use. Ukraine focuses strikes on refineries, airfields, and command centers, not symbolic or civilian targets. Moscow protests loudly but avoids direct confrontation, while both sides test each other's limits. 2. Strategic stalemate. Political backlash in Washington or European capitals could slow assistance. The war would then revert to a positional grind, with limited Ukrainian offensives and renewed Russian assaults in Donbass. 3. Full-scale escalation. If Russia responds forcefully, for example, by striking US assets or NATO logistics hubs, the conflict could spiral into open confrontation. Analysts warn this remains unlikely but not impossible if Moscow perceives existential threat. 4. Forced negotiations. Should Ukrainian deep strikes significantly damage Russia's energy revenue, internal pressure on the Kremlin might grow. Combined with sanctions fatigue, this could push Moscow toward negotiations, though on harsher terms than before. Numbers behind the war. Duration: over 1,300 days since the February 2022 invasion. Russian military losses: Western estimates around 500,000 killed and wounded. Ukrainian losses: estimated 350,000 combined casualties. Economic cost: Russia's GDP growth slowed to 0.8% in 2025, down from 3.6% in 2024, after widespread refinery disruptions and falling export revenue. Oil output: down 11% year-on-year due to recurring drone attacks on storage facilities near the Baltic and Black Sea. Such figures highlight why targeting energy assets could be strategically decisive, and why Moscow considers it an existential threat. Conclusion: Washington's decision to back Ukrainian strikes inside Russia marks a historic inflection point in the war. The aim is clear: to cripple Russia's war economy and shorten the conflict by hitting the fuel that powers it. But the cost is equally clear: a higher risk of escalation, diplomatic rupture, and global instability. For now, Kiev gains new leverage, Moscow faces mounting pressure, and Washington walks a dangerous tightrope, balancing deterrence, alliance unity, and the ever-present shadow of a larger war. Whether this gamble accelerates victory or invites catastrophe will depend on the precision of Ukraine's strikes, and the restraint of both superpowers watching each other through the fog of war.